On July 10, 2006, a 38-year-old woman named Milena Del Valle was driving through a brand-new tunnel in downtown Boston. She was a passenger in a car driven by her husband. They were on their way home from a baseball game at Fenway Park. Without warning, a 12-ton section of concrete ceiling panel broke free from the tunnel roof. The massive panel fell directly onto their car, crushing it instantly. Milena Del Valle died at the scene. Her husband survived with severe injuries. The tunnel had been open for less than a year. This tunnel was part of the most expensive highway project in American history, the Big Dig, officially called the Central Artery Tunnel Project. It was supposed to cost $2.6 billion and take 7 years to complete. Instead, it cost $24.3 billion and took 16 years. That's nearly 10 times the original estimate. During construction, workers died in accidents that were quickly minimized. Contractors falsified safety inspections. Substandard materials were used throughout the project. And when Milena Del Valle was killed by falling concrete in a tunnel that was supposed to be safe, investigators discovered a pattern of fraud, corruption, and criminal negligence that reached the highest levels of the construction companies and government agencies involved. This is the story of the Big Dig, a project that was supposed to transform Boston, but instead became a symbol of everything that can go wrong when profit is prioritized over human life and public safety.
To understand the Big Dig, you first need to understand the problem it was meant to solve. Boston's Central Artery was an elevated highway built in the 1950s. It was a 6-lane elevated expressway that cut directly through the heart of downtown Boston, carrying Interstate 93 through the city. When it was built, planners predicted it would handle 75,000 vehicles per day. By the 1980s, it was handling over 200,000 vehicles per day. The highway was completely overwhelmed. Traffic crawled for 10 hours every single day. The accident rate was 4 times the national average. The elevated highway created a physical and psychological barrier separating downtown Boston from the waterfront and historic neighborhoods. Businesses suffered. The city's economy stagnated. Something had to be done. In the early 1980s, Massachusetts transportation officials proposed a radical solution. Instead of adding more lanes or building another elevated highway, they would move the entire Central Artery underground. They would build a massive tunnel system beneath the existing elevated highway while keeping traffic flowing on the old highway during construction. Once the tunnels were complete, they would demolish the elevated highway and create parks and public spaces where it once stood. The concept was ambitious. Some said impossible. But Massachusetts officials believed it was necessary to save Boston's future. In 1982, officially began. Environmental impact studies were conducted. Engineers began designing the tunnel system. By 1987, Congress approved federal funding for the project. The estimated cost was $2.6 billion. Construction was scheduled to begin in 1991 and finish by 1998. 7 years. That was the promise. The reality would be very different.
Construction officially began in September 1991. The general contractor was Bechtel Corporation, one of the largest construction companies in the world, working with Parsons Brinckerhoff as the engineering firm. Together, they formed a consortium overseen by the Massachusetts Highway Department. The scope of the work was staggering. Workers would dig tunnels beneath an operating highway and beneath active railroad lines. They would excavate beneath buildings that were hundreds of years old. They would build underwater tunnels beneath Boston Harbor. They would construct the widest cable-stayed bridge in the world, all while keeping traffic flowing through one of America's busiest cities. Almost immediately, problems emerged. The project was far more complex than anyone had anticipated. The soil beneath Boston was unstable in many areas. Unexpected archaeological finds required construction delays. Utility lines had to be relocated constantly. Costs began rising rapidly. By 1995, just 4 years into construction, it was clear the project would not be finished by 1998. It was also clear the cost would far exceed the original estimate. By 2000, the estimated total cost had risen to $14.6 billion, more than 5 times the original estimate, and the project was only 70% complete. During these peak construction years, over 5,000 workers labored on the project simultaneously. They worked underground in cramped, dangerous conditions. They operated massive tunnel boring machines. They installed enormous concrete panels to line the tunnel walls and ceilings. The work was relentless and hazardous. Several workers died during construction, though the exact number remains disputed. Official reports acknowledge at least 2 construction-related deaths, but workers and union representatives claimed the real number was higher. Some accidents were attributed to pre-existing medical conditions or classified as non-work-related to avoid negative publicity and increased insurance costs. The tunnel construction method used a technique called slurry wall construction. Workers dug deep trenches and filled them with concrete to create walls that held back the surrounding soil. Then they excavated between these walls to create the tunnel space. The tunnel ceilings were constructed using massive precast concrete panels hung from the ceiling by a complex system of steel bolts and epoxy anchors. This hanging ceiling system was supposed to be safe and permanent. It wasn't. Throughout construction, there were warning signs that contractors were cutting corners. Inspections were rushed. Materials were not always tested properly. Workers reported that supervisors pressured them to work faster, even when safety protocols should have slowed them down. But the pressure to complete the project was enormous. Every delay cost millions of dollars. Politicians wanted the project finished. Contractors wanted to move on to other projects. Safety became secondary to speed.
The problems didn't end when construction was declared mostly complete in 2006. Within months, serious issues began appearing. Tunnel walls developed leaks. Water seeped through the supposedly waterproof concrete. By 2007, over 400 leaks had been identified in the tunnel system. Some were minor. Others were significant flows of water that required constant pumping. Engineers were baffled. These were brand new tunnels built with modern materials and techniques. They shouldn't be leaking at all. Then came July 10, 2006, Milena Del Valle's death. The investigation that followed revealed shocking truths. The concrete ceiling panel that killed her had been attached to the tunnel roof using epoxy anchors. These anchors were supposed to hold the 12-ton panels securely for decades, but they failed after less than a year. Investigators discovered that the epoxy used was not suitable for the application. The anchors had been improperly installed. And, most damning, inspection reports had been falsified. Contractors had signed off on work that had never been properly inspected. Federal prosecutors launched a criminal investigation. What they found was systematic fraud. Powers Fasteners, the company that supplied the epoxy anchors, had knowingly provided a product unsuitable for overhead applications. Inspectors had falsified reports claiming they had checked installations that they had never actually examined. Bechtel and Parsons Brinckerhoff had failed to properly oversee the subcontractors. The entire quality control system had broken down, compromised by pressure to finish quickly and maximize profits. Criminal charges followed. Powers Fasteners was found criminally negligent and agreed to pay $51 million in restitution. The company's parent corporation paid an additional $6 million in fines. Several Bechtel and Parsons Brinckerhoff managers were prosecuted. Some served prison time. Bechtel and Parsons Brinckerhoff agreed to pay $407 million in restitution to settle lawsuits related to the Del Valle death and other defects throughout the tunnel system. But the investigation revealed something even more disturbing. The ceiling collapse that killed Milena Del Valle wasn't an isolated incident. Thousands of similar epoxy anchors had been installed throughout the tunnel system. Any of them could fail at any time. Crews spent years inspecting and replacing anchors throughout the tunnels. The work cost hundreds of millions of additional dollars. And it raised a terrifying question. How many other corners had been cut? How many other substandard materials had been used? How many other falsified inspections were hidden in the project records?
The leaks provided another clue. Investigators examining the tunnel walls discovered that some of the concrete used in construction did not meet specifications. Subcontractors had used cheaper materials than required. Inspectors who should have caught this either missed it or deliberately ignored it. The result was concrete that cracked and leaked far sooner than it should have. The Big Dig was officially declared complete in December 2007, 16 years after construction began. The final cost was $14.6 billion in direct construction costs. But when you include interest on the bonds used to finance the project, the total cost reached $24.3 billion, nearly 10 times the original estimate. It remains the most expensive highway project in American history by far. For comparison, the entire interstate highway system, which includes over 46,000 miles of highways across the entire United States, cost about $114 billion adjusted for inflation. The Big Dig, which covers just 7.8 miles, cost over $24 billion. Despite the cost overruns, the scandals, and the death of Milena Del Valle, the completed project did achieve many of its original goals. Traffic congestion in downtown Boston decreased significantly. Travel times improved. The demolition of the elevated central artery opened up space for the Rose Kennedy Greenway, a series of parks and public spaces that reconnected downtown Boston with the waterfront and historic neighborhoods. The Zochem Bridge became an iconic landmark. Air quality improved as vehicles spent less time idling in traffic. By traditional measures, the project was a success.
But the legacy of the Big Dig is complicated and controversial. On one hand, it transformed Boston in positive ways. Traffic flows better. The city feels more connected. Thousands of people use and enjoy the parks built where the elevated highway once stood. On the other hand, the cost was staggering. Massachusetts taxpayers will be paying off the debt for decades. The cost overruns diverted funding from other infrastructure projects across the state. Roads, bridges, and public transit systems that needed maintenance and upgrades were neglected because money had been funneled into the Big Dig. The corruption and criminal negligence that led to Milena Del Valle's death left a permanent stain on the project's reputation. Her death was entirely preventable. It resulted directly from contractors prioritizing profit over safety, and from a failed oversight system that allowed substandard work to be approved and hidden. The criminal prosecutions and financial settlements provided some measure of justice, but they couldn't bring back a life lost to corporate greed and systemic failure. The Big Dig also raised troubling questions about large infrastructure projects in America. If corruption and fraud could reach such levels in a project this visible, with this much oversight, what happens in smaller projects that receive less scrutiny? How many other infrastructure projects are built with substandard materials and falsified inspections? How many disasters are waiting to happen because contractors cut corners and inspectors looked the other way? The tunnel leaks continue to this day. Crews constantly monitor and repair problem areas. Some sections of the tunnel require permanent dehumidification systems to prevent water damage. The tunnels that were supposed to last 100 years are showing significant deterioration after just 20 years. Future repair costs are unknown, but certainly substantial. The Big Dig stands as both an engineering achievement and a cautionary tale. It proves that ambitious infrastructure projects can be completed even in the most challenging conditions. But it also demonstrates the catastrophic consequences when profit is prioritized over safety, when oversight fails, and when no one is held accountable until someone dies. Milena Del Valle should be alive today. She died because contractors used substandard materials, falsified inspections, and prioritized profits over human life. The fact that it took her death to expose the systematic fraud and negligence is itself an indictment of the entire construction and oversight system. The most troubling question remains unanswered. What other problems are hidden in the Big Dig's 7.8 miles of tunnels and infrastructure? The ceiling collapse that killed Milena Del Valle was discovered only because it failed catastrophically. How many other defects remain hidden, waiting to fail? The tunnel leaks suggest widespread problems with materials and construction quality. But comprehensive inspections would cost hundreds of millions of dollars and require closing tunnels for extended periods. So the tunnels remain in use, and we hope nothing else fails. The Big Dig cost $24 billion. It transformed Boston, and it killed at least one person due to criminal negligence and fraud. That is its legacy. If you want to uncover more stories about American infrastructure built on hidden costs and forgotten sacrifices, subscribe to Hidden America. Next time, we'll explore the construction of the Hoover Dam and the workers whose bodies may still be entombed in the concrete. We'll investigate the men whose bodies may still be entombed in the concrete. And we'll ask why worker safety always seems to be sacrificed for profit and speed. Subscribe now for more hidden infrastructure stories. And the next time you drive through a tunnel or across a bridge, remember that behind every engineering achievement are human stories of sacrifice, danger, and sometimes tragedy. Stories that deserve to be told and remembered.